One small step for man.
Welcome to Earth.
One giant leap for mankind.
What's up, man? It's Rick.
UFOs are real.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to I Believe in Humans podcast. I am your host who likes butter on his toast, Mr. Justin Tandy, and to my right is the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Dustin Heyer. Dustin, how you doing today, brother?
I am fantastic. I won a bet this week.
You sure did. And
yeah.
to be honest, I'm surprised you're still standing after hearing the news that the Pentagon dropped on us on Thursday, was it, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, that still hasn't fully hit me yet. I haven't digested it all. I'm surprised you're not nude right now because that was the terms of our bet.
I know. I mean, we didn't even really get a chance to solidify that on air. I know that's like the people were like waiting, wanting, like, oh man, I can't wait to tune. And by the way, if you don't know what we're talking about, you need to go back to episode 1. But yeah, I mean, before we could even figure out, I was saying disclosure might not happen for another 10 to 20 years. I think was the over-under was 10 years.
You said 20 to 30, and you shamed me for saying 2020.
Don't try to bump it up. All right. Nobody likes a gloater, okay?
It's in the audio files. It's there.
I didn't expect. I'll be honest. I didn't expect us to not make it through the week before the bet was won. Right. So if you don't know what we're talking about and you've been living under a rock, I know the mainstream media is not covering this, but it mostly are. You know, I think I did see Tucker Carlson on Fox News is pretty much the only mainstream outlet I saw hit this. Tomas, can you throw up that headline real quick? This is what's been kind of buzzing, and I know if you're following, if you're listening to our show, you probably heard of guys like George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, right? There it is right there. The Pentagon on UFOs. They are off-world vehicles not made on this Earth. So that is basically, in a long story short, there was a Pentagon consultant who basically admitted to giving reports to like the Senate Intelligence Committee or something as early as, this was like back in March. So this is like during Corona season. This isn't like, 1947 we're talking about. We're talking a few months ago, Dustin. So, yeah. I mean, where were you when you heard the news, and what was your immediate thought besides, I need to call Justin?
I mean, I first immediately tried to call you. Then I immediately tried to call Tomas. He was asleep, I believe. He's on the West Coast. We're over on the East. And then I called my mom, actually. She was the first one I finally got on the phone. And then she started researching shit, and that blew her mind. I was just at home. I was hanging out with my daughter, getting her ready for the day.
Yeah.
And that hit up my news feed. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I got to be honest, it's one of those things of like, I know people have like dedicated their lives to researching this topic. And even when we started this podcast, I'm there. I'm just like, I want to see some evidence. I want to be a little more scientific and objective about it. To see, this doesn't really like blow my hair back. I kind of already anticipated that this was happening. Mm-hmm. But to hear the United States government admit this is pretty crazy, considering that, they've dedicated 73 years at least to keeping this thing a secret. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see. I know that people, want to hear anything and everything and get all this information, but it just happened a couple days ago, this launch. So I know we're going to be hitting this subject in future episodes, so I don't want to get hung up on it too much right now, but I definitely wanted to, it feels like an injustice to not mention it right before we start.
Well, I mean, they haven't really given up too much besides that. They said they will be giving up new evidence in the future, which I'm excited for. But I mean, as soon as I hit up my other friends and group threads and like, hey, did you guys know this happened? And there's fake news. Yeah, right. So once they actually give us some real evidence, and hopefully before the end of the year, maybe we'll get a little sneak peek picture of a UFO or some type of materials that can actually give us some hard fact evidence. That'd be really cool.
Well, the funny thing about the fake news people and all this stuff is like, I mean, this is the New York Times. This isn't like the conspiracy theorist Times. This is like the Pentagon. And like, we already got the videos in, I think we talked in our last episode, that the gimbal video and like the last New York Times article and all this stuff that was released was, the Department of Defense admitted this like in April. So here we are in July, just a few months later, you've got the Pentagon admitting that they are off-world. They're not saying aliens, okay? So I will give you that. It's not aliens. But I will say if there's, when they say off-world, what the hell else is it?
I mean, maybe we already have a secret moon base, and those are our vehicles that we built on the moon. That's technically off-world, right? Did you give
That is off-world. That is off-world. Maybe it's Luke and Han and Leia and the whole gang is getting back together, right?
Hopefully.
So anyway, before we get this episode today, guys, just to, like I said, we'll cover this topic in later episodes. But today, we wanted to talk about the private space race, right? We mentioned on the introduction episode that sort of what we believe. One of the things that's sort of fueling the next step of human evolution and sort of the trajectory of where the human race is going is turning into a multiplanetary race. But also this is sort of kind of feeds into the disclosure news on Thursday, which is, I think that this is part of the pressure cooker that the government is feeling. That's like, hey man, like you've got this like race of this like Power Ranger super team of billionaires trying to push humankind, into the cosmos. And when we get there, if we find out that there's other things out there flying around, people are going to have questions. So we might as well start to slow roll that, right? So, well, again, I digress. Before I got too far, I don't think that people really understand that we have a certified junior astronaut actually on our show, right? So we don't have to go too far. This is not someone that we had to go get interviewed, guys. You're looking at him right there. That's Mr. Dustin Heyer. I think he learned from Buzz Aldrin himself. Is this true? Like, where did you learn?
I wouldn't go that far. I did get to go to space camp when I was a kid. It was, I believe, 6th grade summer. It was the first summer the Mountain View Space Camp was open. Okay. And man, that was just amazing. It was so much fun. I did meet Buzz Aldrin. He wasn't one of the trainers. I did get a book signed by him. I got to shake his hand. I will share that picture on our Instagram. Yeah, he's an absolute legend. I love Buzz.
Please do. Please do.
But I wouldn't say I am the astronaut you think I am. We had a great mission. I was the pilot of our simulation, which was so much fun. My friend Nick Zeiler, if you're listening, what's up, Nick? He was the commander of our simulation. It was a lot of fun. We were flawless. We got everything right. I mean, it's just a little kid's dream in there because you get in this and you suit up. You're sitting in this giant motion machine. There's switches and buttons everywhere. Like, it was just so much fun. Flawless mission. But we forgot one thing, and that was the landing gear on the way back in.
Ooh, it was
pretty rough. Everything else is flawless. Somehow, just got lost in the mix of all the levers and buttons and switches. But besides that, I got my wings. I got to meet Buzz. I had a trip I'll remember forever. I don't think the Mountain View Space Camp's there anymore. But if you're a kid listening to this, or if you have kids, sign them up because that was a lot of fun, and I'll remember that forever.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I like how you casually omitted the fact that you somehow missed lunch on this trip and you ate some sort of giant burrito out of a vending machine and chugged a soda.
Oh, and then
you went into like the G-force propulsion thing or whatever it's called. Well, give the people what they want, Dustin. Tell us the fun parts, right?
I mean, I always wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. Come on, like, who is either you wanted to be an astronaut or a firefighter growing up or a professional athlete. I wanted to be an astronaut. I was a super nerd, but the moment I realized I will never be an astronaut was when I couldn't take the G-forces. That is one of those, what are they like? Those gyros you see sometimes at like amusement parks where you get in like this cage and you're spinning and it's like on 3 axes and going crazy.
It's like the Leonardo da Vinci like torture rack looking thing. Yeah.
Well, it was before dinner. We were all taking turns doing this, and I didn't get to do it, and so we go and have dinner. I had this giant burrito. When you're a kid and you get free refill sodas, you're like hitting every single soda to make this just giant super mix.
That's your first misstep right there.
Maybe 2 of those, And when we go back, and the first experiment we do is when we sit in a chair and we spin. And once you stop, you go up and you look at the person's eyes, and they're still moving, and they're trying to. It's an experiment to show how the liquids in your body are still moving after, even though that you've stopped. And so we got to do that. And then they're like, oh, wait, by the way, who didn't get to do the gyro thing before dinner? And it's like, oh, I did. So I jump in right after I did that experiment. And I'm in it. I'm having a blast. I'm screaming, faster, faster, faster. And then immediately, no, slower, slower. And as it's coming to a stop, I just spray vomited everywhere.
Yeah.
As my friends know, I don't have the best stomach. And so I don't, I'll never be an astronaut. I'll definitely try to go to space someday if it is ever affordable, but
clean up on aisle gyro. Yeah. Well, there we go. There you have it, guys.
Thank you for making me tell that story.
Yes, please. Next time you're, the only thing I can ever think of is like you go to the carnival and you're stuck on like that Gravitron, like the spinning UFO thing, and you get stuck to the wall. When you first told me that story, that's what I thought you meant, and I imagined you projectile vomiting, but because of centrifugal force, it going over and hitting the person next to you. Mm-hmm. Right, like just sticking to the wall, right, and just painting the walls. There's got to be stories of people that have seen that happen, or some guy, someone who works in there. Oh, is that our little mascot there?
Tulip, no. Sorry about that.
She's excited. All right, guys, we're back. Justin, Dustin, and for those of you waiting in suspense, Tulip, Dustin's dog, has relieved herself in the backyard, and all is right with the universe again.
Tulip Pumpernickel, by the way, full name.
Tulip Pumpernickel. Yeah. She's a pretty cute dog. We'll post a picture of her on our Instagram, give you a little behind the scenes there. She's a cutie and a force to be reckoned with. All right, so anyway, we're talking about Space Race today, okay? So before we get into 2020, all the names that you've heard of, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and all this stuff, I just want to take a quick step back. Like, why did humans even get into space to begin with? Where did this come from? Because space ain't easy and it ain't cheap, right? So for those of you who are, at home still quarantined and all that stuff, I highly, highly recommend. There's a little series on Netflix called History 101. Episode 2 is about Space Race, so go and watch it. I'm not going to give you a 20-minute recap of what that whole episode is about. But in a nutshell, basically, post-World War II, after atomic bombs and all this stuff, Americans are scared shitless of the Russians because the Russians... the Cold War obviously starts, right? And we're having these like missile tests. And the only way that you can launch a missile, it's not necessarily the atomic bomb itself, because in World War II it had to be dropped from a plane. But all of a sudden we start developing the ICBM, right? The Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. And the only way to get that, launched from America over to Russia and hit Moscow is to launch that son of a bitch up into space, okay? So the space race is on. It's a fear-mongering sort of thing. We're afraid of space, right? As we continue, basically, Russia gets Sputnik up, and for the first time ever in our country's history, Americans are looking up over their heads. All we know is the Russians got like a satellite up there. Is it taking pictures? Is it armed? What's it doing? And we're terrified. So public sentiment starts to build and swell around the idea of getting into space. Eisenhower is actually the president who builds and creates NASA, okay? And then JFK is the one who sort of takes it to the next level, okay? So that's kind of where we're at. 500 million people across the globe tune in 1969 to see Neil Armstrong land on the moon. And the reason why that moon landing was so important was because before the moon landing, frankly, the Russians were kicking our ass. Getting people, they got the first person in space. They're just breaking record after record after record, getting all these people into space. And in true American style, we just say, hey, you know what? We're just going to step back and swing for the fucking fences on this. Right? You can have all the little bunt singles over here. We're going to put a man on the moon and bring his ass back. How about that?
Salami.
Right? So that is where the public sentiment starts to build around this thing, right? There's a lot of shortcomings and some things that go wrong before they get up there. But long story short, it was a big rallying cry to get Neil and the gang up there. So, Dustin, I know you've obviously went to space camp and all this stuff. Do you ever remember, like, your folks? Obviously, you and I were not alive in 1969 to watch this live, but, where where did you sort of where did you pick up your space allure from? Is it just pop culture? Is it your dad?
That's a great question because I've never really thought about that. I think it's probably mostly from movies. Like that's one of my biggest passions is film. And I mean, Star Wars is one of my favorite franchises of all time. So there was always that allure and curiosity with space. But also, when I was a kid, my grandfather was one of my best friends growing up, and so I made model rockets with him, and we would
Right.
build these rockets and then launch them up and bring them back. And I had all these different rockets, and so it always appealed to me. It always appealed to my inner nerd. What about you?
Right.
What about you? When do you remember really loving this topic and this subject?
So first of all, I totally remember those rockets, and I love them. And actually, you just gave me a great idea because I don't think I've played it. You're talking about the ones with the little engine. It was like the C engine, D engine, and you put the little ignition, and you click the electric thing, and it sends a signal and lights it up. Yeah, those things are badass, and I totally forgot about them. And now now I'm thinking we should do like an extra bonus content of you and I like rocket building contest. Like, let's go light some shit on. You want
to make it a
set them off in the
competition
backyard.
now, huh? I mean, I was thinking of a hobby with my daughter, but I mean, if I could start cracking that whip and teaching her how to make a real rocket, we make a competition.
We can make rockets. Do you remember making like potato guns and stuff like that? Like,
I never did the potato gun thing.
You never did the potato gun?
I never did the potato gun thing. I mean, I used to get creative and make bongs out of stuff. I was from California.
Okay, all right. Let's keep it PG, right? No, I'm just playing around. Nowadays, people can just YouTube. People got to remember when we're not crazy. We're not super old, right? We're in our 30s, but I think we're on the cusp of millennial. But we're talking about making this stuff pre-YouTube, okay? So for all the youngsters out there listening, go Google like model rockets and all that stuff and check it out. So
I haven't even looked at that stuff in a while. They probably got some really cool stuff now.
Right. To be honest, I'm a child of the 90s. So for me, my sort of space, I sort of tune into what is going on in space around the year 2000, which is when the International Space Station comes online. I think it was commissioned and started getting built in 1998. So to just kind of go back and so like we put Neil on the moon, right? After that, I think we put another like 10 or 11 astronauts go to the moon. But then all of a sudden we stop, right? We don't go to the moon anymore. And it'll be a question. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, out there about did we actually land, right? Why didn't we go back? What did they find while they're up there? I think it's a little more mundane than that. I think the almighty dollar is basically what ruled it. There wasn't a whole lot going on up there, potentially.
I think there's
and it's just
the dark side.
It's just really expensive. You got to remember we're landing on the moon at the same time like you've got like Martin Luther King in 1968, right? Like people were getting assassinated in 1968. You've got Vietnam, you've got the civil rights movement. Like there's a lot of stuff going on at home that you've got in 1991 the Soviet Union collapses, so like there goes our number one competitor, right? So if you're like you're going to win the championship and you don't even have another team that shows up, right? Like you're wearing the crown and you're happy, you're content, right? Yep. So we stopped going because it's crazy expensive, and all of a sudden, Russia starts to, instead of going to the moon, because we've already been there and done that, they're the ones that sort of flip the script, and they're like, well, you know what? If you're going to go to the moon, then what we're going to do is we're going to set up like a permanent residence in space, okay? And then that starts to perk us up. This is post-Cold War, so now we're willing to work with them. And that's when they start to sort of commission, the idea of the International Space Station. And that's kind of it, dude, for like 20 years, right? It's just been kind of like, I don't want to say lame, like I know, but they stopped making the rockets.
Yeah, they pulled all their funding out of NASA. I thought what was really interesting about the International Space Station is that so many countries came together to work on it. I thought that was
correct.
That's a very beautiful thing.
Yeah. So actually, what was it? It was 5 different countries, 5 different space agencies. So that's Japan, Russia, the United States, Canada, and then the European Space Agency came together and built it. Here's some stats about the ISS. It costs $120 billion to make. So that is like the most expensive object, like basically ever
So is that how
commissioned.
much it costs to make, or how much? Because I mean, they're probably still putting billions of dollars into just maintaining the thing too.
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
Isn't that what like Benkin and these guys? That's the whole
Yeah.
thing with SpaceX. Just put these people up there to swap like batteries and like just like power lines and cables and all this stuff. And I know there's a lot of great, awesome, like, you know, I can't even imagine what they're coming up with, you know, doing these experiments on biological stuff, growing food. You know, everything that they're doing on the space station is 100% important. So I don't want to like take away from that. I'm just saying like let's go back to like the 60s and 70s for a second when we've got von Braun, right? We steal this like the master of the V2 rocket, right? Yeah, we bring over 1,600, you know, Operation Paperclip brings over 1,600 Nazi scientists and engineers to basically create our rocket program so that we could beat Russia, right? So he's the creator of the V2 rocket, and then he creates the Saturn rocket, which is what is ultimately gets us to the moon. The point I'm saying is von Braun was saying back in the 70s that he could get us to Mars. Mm-hmm. Right? So like all of a sudden it just like we just sort of like settled for like let's just go to this like suborbital, you know, International Space Station and look at plants and stuff. We didn't like someone took their foot off the gas. That's why I mean, you know, it gets a little lame, right? Like I know you were kind of into the space shuttle when you were at space camp. You were in a space shuttle when you said you were talking about landing gear, right?
Space shuttle, yeah, it was simulated space shuttle. What was it? Discovery, I think was the one they named it.
Right. Yeah. I remember that.
That shuttle was the most intriguing spacecraft that I remember growing up. I mean, rockets were cool, but it was the look of that thing. The space shuttle kind of looked like this futuristic plane.
Right.
You know, that was appealing to young kids like you and I. But it's very interesting. It just stopped. I mean, funding, it's got to be a big thing. Like you said, there's a lot of things going on in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s even, to where we needed to put funding elsewhere. I guess that must have been a political decision because, I mean, NASA was created from our government, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I think what happened is it's definitely expensive, right? And we start to look at Mars and the Red Planet, and you get all sorts of movies. Star Wars definitely helped with this, like you're talking about. You know, Star Wars starts coming out in the 70s, but I think honestly, what I think happened is in the 80s, Space Shuttle, the Challenger mission, right? So back then they used, you know, like launching people into space is a huge thing, and you know, they used to remember like in the old school days, you know, when you wanted to watch something at TV in your classroom and they had to wheel that like steel cart in there. Oh
man, I love those days.
With the TV with the toe straps, like strapping the TV down onto that steel cage thing. So like they're rolling that in, you're watching, hey kids, all gather around, let's watch these, you know, astronauts go to space. And then the Space Shuttle Challenger blows up on national television. And it's just kind of like instantaneous, like, oh man, this is like it's a huge tragedy. Yeah. And I think that was just like a big gut punch for people. It was like, we're already on the fence of like, this is crazy expensive. Is it worth it? And then you watch people die on live television and it's kind of like, whoa, like, I think we need to pull back for a second. And in my opinion, I think that's why politicians and people just don't do anything that, if you're not pushing your congressman and senator to do stuff, they're not just going to do it, right? So it was like we really lost sort of the hope for it and got into like other stuff, you know? So anyway, that brings us up to 2020. So I just wanted to take a brief look back so that could try to get us up to speed to like now, because there's so much more cool, exciting stuff going on now. And I know that you are eager to talk about this, right? You've been researching a lot of these, you know, big name companies. I mean, I joked earlier, it's like all of a sudden we've got like the 1998 Bulls in terms of the greatest team ever assembled to put humankind into space. You're talking Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, Bob Bigelow, you know what I mean? And for that reference, by the way, is because I just finished watching The Last Dance on Netflix. Michael Jordan and the Night Bulls.
That's fine.
They touch on Space Jam. Great series. Great series. Anyway, so Dustin, here we are in 2020. All right. It used to be countries pushing each other to get in space. Now we have corporations competing to get into space. So give me the good and the bad and the ugly. I mean, what do you think? Is this healthy? Is this healthy competition to have corporate, like, greed entering like space, like the final frontier.
Well, I don't
know.
think
I don't know if it's healthy.
I don't think it's a competition, really. I feel every single one of these companies have a different mission. You got Elon over at SpaceX, like he wants to colonize Mars. That's his big mission. They're gonna be launching off in the next 5 years. You have Bezos, who wants to just commercialize space travel just for the everyday civilian. He wants to have people live in and traveling to just orbit, low orbit. And you got then you have Virgin Galactic, who is training. They just signed a deal with NASA to train private astronauts, as well as Orbit, which is another company. I believe they're Seattle-based, is French CEO. And they're doing the same thing. They're basically creating this luxurious space camp. And, I'm definitely going to try and get in over there. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Adult space camp. Yeah. I can't wait to see what goes on.
But I mean, they're just complementing each other. The same with Robert Bigelow. He's been working on this for years, creating these modular essential space stations. And so he's essentially trying to create hotels in space. So these guys are all kind of all have their own little niche in the space privatized sector. So I wouldn't say that's necessarily a competition, but it's really cool that they actually have the money to do these things now. It's actually a realistic chance that you and I may be able to go to space in our lifetime.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. You touched on a good point where it's like, I mean, you're talking about Jeff Bezos, who's the richest man in the world. He's probably going to be the first trillionaire, before this whole pandemic thing is over. But you're right. They're all sort of like grabbing at different parts of the equation because there's so many moving parts when it comes to getting human beings in space. Because let's be real, space is like the most unforgiving, volatile place that you could possibly go. It's like crazy freezing cold, it's crazy hot, it's no oxygen, no gravity. It's the most brutal environment you could possibly imagine, and we are the most fragile biological beings. We're not meant to leave our gravity and our atmosphere, so we have to make it work for us. And you're right, they're all sort of like grabbing a piece. I guess it's like Blue Origin and SpaceX are trying. They're really into the reusable rocket, right? I think the whole key to this operation is money, right? Like if money is what stopped us, then money is what's going to like reignite us.
Absolutely.
And I think I said this before, but it was like the average cost of a NASA space shuttle launch was like $500 million.
Yeah, about $500 to $600 million, somewhere in there.
And you lost all the propulsion parts, right? Like, I just imagine
the rocket would be gone. You return with the capsule.
The shuttle could come back and land, but all that stuff that it was attached to, and again, I'm not a rocket scientist, but you'd see all that stuff blowing and separating off. And then the plane would come back, and then you'd have to reattach all that. So when Elon goes and he starts, using his drone ships to catch all this stuff, he's launching rockets for around $60 million, right? That's like pocket change to these guys. So I think that's definitely the driving force. And you're right. I think Branson and these other guys, they see that there's an opportunity for $1, right? If you can make $1, it's definitely worth the risk. To get into these things. So you're right. You make a good point, right? So what about SpaceX? So we've heard a lot about SpaceX. Obviously, they're sort of like the predominant name when it comes to like
they're paving the way.
Privatized space. I think of, obviously they just put the first commercial pilots or commercial astronauts in there. NASA's using them. I remember seeing Elon smoking a joint with Joe Rogan on his podcast, right? They're just like owning the mainstream. So give me some stuff on SpaceX, right? Hit me with it.
Well, I mean, SpaceX they're making their money right now by launching satellites into orbit for commercial companies, and they also have contracts to bring astronauts to and from the International Space Station. So they're making their money there. But like you said, they revolutionized space travel for humankind right now, and that's again just a blip on the radar in 2020. I think it was probably the coolest thing, besides now aliens are real, but the coolest thing that 2020 has to offer is that it was the SpaceX launched and then the rocket actually coming back and landing. Like it's such a big deal, and I can't believe it wasn't covered more. On top of that, you're able to see everything inside the cockpit. watch
Oh
the
my
entire
God.
mission. Like, it was so cool you just felt like you're a part of it. If you guys are able to watch it, if not, we'll link it on our website. You can find it on YouTube. But the technology now is so amazing. It felt like everything was like a touch screen in front of them. The capsule looked so
Oh,
clean.
dude,
It wasn't
yeah.
all these
Look at that.
fun switches and knobs, like it was when I went to space camp.
So
It was
sexy.
and then on top of that, Elon wants his astronauts to look freaking cool. So
Right.
he designed this spacesuit that looks like you're going to the Met, the gala. You're
Like a tuxedo,
a
yeah.
tuxedo, and
Slim fit. They got skinny jeans in space now. You know what I mean?
Is bringing
no,
the cool
he
back.
actually no. Seriously, he hired like a Hollywood movie like costume designer. This guy had done a bunch of stuff, and it was funny. I remember reading an interview with the guy, and it was just like he had no idea what Elon was actually like signing him up for. He just thought like, he wants something cool to like. He thought it was like a fundraising effort. He had no idea it was actually going to be like put into practical use, which is so cool. Yeah, look at that. Look at that stuff, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-boggling. Like you said, that this didn't get more coverage. I know, like a lot of people, like you and I and stuff. We this was like live broadcast on their website and stuff. Some people touched on it, but there's been so much going on the last few months that it definitely like flew under the radar. And actually, these guys are set to return this coming weekend.
August 2nd, August 3rd. I'm not sure exactly when
Yeah.
we're going to be. You will be hearing this episode, as we haven't even put
Yeah.
our first episode on the platform yet, which we
Sure.
will hopefully this next week. But yeah, this upcoming weekend, which would be August 2nd, August 3rd, is their plan. I'm sure it depends on weather and things like that. That might postpone what they're doing. This is the scariest part of the mission especially for
For
Elon. We want to bring our astronauts back safe.
100% for sure. Yeah, so they're really crushing it. I mean, you got to think Elon Musk. I remember I told this story in the opening. I had a chance to work with them when they were just like starting up. They started like back in like Hawthorne. It was like around 2003, 2004. Because I remember they were like, nobody knew who they were. And this is like totally random. Like, but why I remember this was we graduated high school in like 03. We go down there. And the reason why I remember the year so well is because the way they started to kind of get some funding going for them was, if you remember the original Iron Man movie,
Yeah.
I believe
One of
Iron
my
Man 1
favorites.
and Iron Man 2 in the Marvel Universe is filmed on location in SpaceX. They're using their warehouse. So
Really?
definitely,
I didn't know that.
yeah, little tidbit for you there, right?
okay.
I gotta
Save
tickle you
that one
every
for the
once in a
trivia
while.
night.
There you go. So yeah, definitely number 2 when Mickey Rourke is like, taking off the little drone heads and it's all white. Yeah. So they were using SpaceX. So they were filming there.
cool.
I remember that. It was really cool. Yeah. So anyway, so we've got SpaceX and then we've got Bezos. So Bezos is big into the reusable rockets and Blue Origin. And I just went on their website because I know of, obviously I've heard of Jeff Bezos, and I've heard of Blue Origin, but I honestly, I didn't know a ton about it. So I went on their website and I researched them, obviously, before we come on and start talking. And I just want to refresh myself. So he's doing reusable rockets. And I know you've got some information, but I just want to throw a little tidbit here real quick, which I thought was really cool because I didn't even think about this. His sort of whole thing was he basically wants to get to the moon and then use it as like a refueling station. I saw an interview with him, and basically he's saying that there's like ice at the polar caps, and they could like extract oxygen and hydrogen, and essentially that's what rocket fuel is made out of. So he's using like the moon as like a gas station to like get to other places, and that kind of blew my mind. Yeah, there we go.
Interesting.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so that's kind of what they're showing right there in that clip. Thanks, Toe, for bringing that up. But Dustin, you've got some other cool stories because I know we read the same article. They actually have been, what have they been doing, like a contest or sweepstakes, or what have they been doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, they've been launching their rocket out into space since I think 2017, and they did a contest. They teamed up with OK Go, who does these viral music videos. If you haven't seen them, they've done some really cool zero gravity stuff, and they did it was a zero gravity art competition for children. And their last payload, they went up. They did these 2 art experiments. The first one was these kids put in a bunch of artistic quote unquote space debris, and there was a magnetized art wire sculpture that would pick up the space debris as it flied around in zero gravity. And so when it came back to Earth, they had this really interesting artistic sculpture I thought was really rad. And then as well, there was the second experiment that I read on was it would pick up the radiation frequencies going up into space and then translated that into a musical composition, which is really cool.
Yeah.
We might have to grab that music piece. Maybe that could be our little opener.
I'm sure we could find it. Yeah, we'll definitely find that. We'll link it on the website. But yeah, I remember that, and I was thinking that's cool. They pick kind of like an audio and a visual type of project, and a lot of these companies have been doing this thing where it's like, I don't know if this is like a fundraising effort or just to kind of get like people involved, but it's like they've been just basically, you can write cards like, Dustin, I love you, like Hallmark cards or whatever, and they'll just put them in the rocket and launch it up into space, and it'll float around and it'll come back, and then they mail it back to you sort of certified like this thing went to 80,000 feet in the air or whatever. And I thought that's pretty cool, especially with Bezos and them. They're smart. They're really they're trying to get kids involved.
I love it.
And in that same interview, he's smart because the problem that we experience with space and as just being like fragile human beings is we're dealing with something where time and, for lack of a better word, space are massive. It's just on such a massive scale that we can't comprehend. Our life spans are so small compared to what we're dealing with. And Bezos was talking about how it's hard because like if you go build a house or something, right? Like if you're a contractor, you go build a house and in like a couple months you're done and boom, there's a house. Like your hard work paid off and you see it. But with space travel and what they're trying to do, he's like, you might work really hard and you don't see the fruits of your labor for like 20, 30 years down the road, or it might not even be in your lifetime, right? You're just trying to pave a road and hoping that the next generations pick up where you left off. So I think it's incredibly a smart move to get these kids engaged at a young age because we all know the youth is the future, but literally like you and your space camp story, this stuff doesn't happen without you have to really groom the next generation.
Future,
you know what I mean?
They're a future. What would be on your postcard if you're able to send one up into space? What would you write on that?
I would probably put my address and be like, when you're abducting people, no probes allowed or something like that. Like, no, I don't know. I to be honest, I thought the idea was kind of silly. Like, I wouldn't pay money to do that. I think it's cool that kids in their classroom do. For me, I was just kind of like, oh, cool, you're going to put my hat in space and then give it back to me. And you're probably going to charge me like $500. That's okay. What would you do? Well, I know you probably have some cooler ideas than me. I'm kind of like, I don't know. I don't fall for those things because I deal with like sales and marketing and stuff for a living. So I get kind of like turned off by it. But you eat it up, dude. What would you do?
I haven't thought about that. I mean, aliens are real. Here's my address. Show me some proof. I have no idea what I'd put up.
So we're on the same wavelength. I thought you were terrified of aliens. So hold on.
I really am.
People don't
but
know.
As I get older, I mean,
you
growing
were terrified.
up, that was one of my biggest fears, and now I'm more curious. Now I think I'm more open to the idea of like meeting something as long as it doesn't eat my face off, But say you got anal probed, but you got a superpower with it. What would your superpower be?
Hopefully to resist anal probing. Hopefully this is a one-time deal.
Kind of a trick joke.
It is, but no, you used to be you tell me that you're terrified of aliens, like you're what was that movie, the Fourth Kind?
Fire in the Sky, terrified.
Fire in the Sky. Oh,
there was also this it was like a found footage film. You could find it on YouTube. I'll see if I could link it on the website. I was scared shitless of this when I was a kid, and it was about this, I think it was like the Peterson family or something. It was on Thanksgiving Day. It was found footage. There was like a circuit, the power went out, and they went to investigate, and they see like this UFO in the distance, and they're probing cows, and then the aliens search up at them, they go in hiding, and all this weird stuff happens inside the house. But when I saw it, I was probably like 9 years old, maybe younger, 7 years old, and I'm watching this ABC special, and it coincided them with.
This was on ABC.
Yeah, it was like it was on prime time
on Thanksgiving.
No, the film took place on Thanksgiving. And I remember my mom's office is right next to the living room, and I couldn't sit down to watch it. I was standing up, and I'm watching this, and like every 5-10 minutes they'll like stop the film, and then they'll have like an actor, but they depicted like a professional, like either a sheriff or like a video professional breaking down why it's real or why it's not. And so like every time there's a commercial break, I'm like running into my mom's office, like, oh my god, this happened, I can't believe it. I'll be back, run back in there, and like I couldn't be in there by myself. I was like so like on the edge of my seat. And then I came across the film probably like 5 years ago and realized it was fake. The entire time I thought it really happened.
It was like the Blair Witch Project before that was a thing. Yeah.
But I'll share that with you. I haven't seen that. That was an interesting little independent film that
is that it right there, Tomas? Did you just find that? Is that it?
No,
that's not.
No, I don't think that's it.
1998 alien abduction incident in Lake County.
Maybe.
No? Oh, okay.
I don't remember that poster cover.
Fun.
What does the description say? What's the synopsis?
Let's see. The McPherson Tape.
McPherson
is a pseudo documentary horror film.
Oh, gotcha. That's why we pay him the big bucks. Good job, Toe. Yeah, definitely link that up there. I would like to go back and watch that for sure. All right, so just to get back on track here. So we talked about SpaceX. We've got Blue Origin. Let's just talk a little bit about who, he kind of strikes me as like a Bond villain because he's like kind of elusive and he's got his like hand in all these cookie jars. And that's Bob Bigelow. Okay. So he's got this like, he's got Bigelow Aerospace, right? And what do they do, Dustin?
I mean, they have a bunch of government contracts. They're mostly working on creating modular commercial space stations right now.
Right.
As far as I know. I mean, you know a lot more about Robert Bigelow than I do.
Sure.
So you can talk a little bit more on this topic than me. What I found really interesting was, we'll cover it on another episode, but if you guys have ever heard of the Skinwalker Ranch, he used to own it and would run experiments on that ranch and kept it private. And that during that time, he went from NIDS, which is his original company, to... That was when he rebranded during the time of him having Skinwalker Ranch and running those experiments to Bigelow Aerospace. Right. And I thought that was really intriguing to what happened on that ranch. What did he learn and find out? Because right after that is when he started working with the government and getting those contracts. So I'm just very curious what happened there.
Yeah, so I'll explain why I call him a Bond villain here for a second. I don't know if he's an evil overlord or anything. He's probably a really nice guy, and but he basically, I'll just sort of rearrange some of those things, Dustin. So he does have Bigelow Aerospace, and they build two things. They build sort of extra modules that you can kind of take up to space and like you would like attach to the International Space Station to give it like a new room and make it bigger. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're doing things like that, but he also is creating these like large scale habitats, right? So if you think about this team working together, right, you've got Bezos and Musk building the rockets and the gas stations and whatnot, paving the roads to get us there. You've got Richard Branson and Virgin basically training the bus drivers, right, getting us the guys that are gonna the manpower. Well, once you get there, you need a place to lay your head. So it sounds like Bigelow has sort of stepped into that space of habitats and life support systems and things like that. And that's almost like what that Orbit, I'm sure, would do. They want to train astronauts and they want to do like a space camp thing here, but I think they also ultimately want to get into the habitat world. Okay. So that's kind of like the the face value of what they're doing. And then, you touched on his workings with the government, which is why he's like this like very cloak and dagger person. There's no secret when you Google this guy's name. He's definitely been into UFOs and all this stuff. But he was part of the initial, he bid on the contract for when Senator Harry Reid initially did, was putting out the money there the government contracts to research and investigate UFOs and like this type of stuff. Primarily Skinwalker Ranch was what they wanted to look at. You're absolutely right. This is the same money and the same time that where like ATIB, where Luis Elizondo and all those guys come from, right? He creates NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science. Okay, and you're right. He goes out, he purchases Skinwalker Ranch, which is sort of like a hotbed for paranormal activity and all this stuff. And they researched the hell out of this thing for a few years. And they never really made anything public in terms of what they found. Now, recently, I know you are a fan of the Joe Rogan podcast, just like I am. And like a week or two ago, it was Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp on there. Did you catch that episode?
Yeah. It was less than a week ago. I think it was Monday. It's last Monday.
It's pretty recent.
Yeah. So
okay,
like 6 days ago,
it was just a couple episodes ago. Do you remember? They were talking about NIDS and this stuff. And I think we differed in what we kind of took. George Knapp was saying that NIDS never became available because it was sort of mundane. Like they never really found a whole lot. And even if they did find stuff, it was just kind of hearsay. So they didn't want to put it out there for risk of like being ridiculed or not really being able to back things up. You had sort of a different take on it, didn't you?
Yeah, I feel that they've learned a lot from the ranch and used it for their own gain, whatever that may be. I mean, we'll dig into Skinwalker Ranch in a later episode because that could be a 2-hour-long conversation there.
Sure.
But there's some various, I feel there's very curious findings. I mean, there's a special called Secret of Skinwalker Ranch on the History Channel that Justin and I have both watched, and they're making their findings public, and I think their findings are extremely compelling. And it was interesting that they did on that show when Joe was asking the hard questions. Well, show me evidence. And George Knapp really didn't have much for him, but they didn't talk about this show.
They didn't reference the History
they didn't
Channel
reference
show,
the show at all, and I thought that was interesting that they didn't. Oh well, there actually is some evidence, you know.
Right. So the reason why I call him sort of a Bond villain is because I feel like he's doing some of this stuff on the up and up. He really wants to work on like, you know, the up and ups, the stuff that he can tell us about. But then I also feel like he has this sort of like back room, like he's got this like, you know, secret access to places like Area 51 and S4, and he's sort of like working both sides of the coin in terms of, you know, he's a rich guy, but he's also using government funding. So, you know, whenever people are sort of like elusive and sort of quiet like that, it just raises more questions than it answers. There was a cool little like 4-minute clip where George Knapp interviews Bob Bigelow inside of one of his large habitats in Vegas, because Bigelow's he's based out of Vegas. We'll link that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either.
We had that clip pulled up. Yeah, it's a really cool interview. Knapp is hitting him, asking him questions about what he thinks about extraterrestrial life and all that stuff. But anyway, the reason why I bring that up is just because he's involved in this private space race, and it makes sense, right? So you've got these other guys that have nothing to do with, you know, aliens and all this stuff. It's just a very like altruistic, right? Trying to get humans to take that next leap, that next step forward, right? So anyway, 2020, here we are. We're starting to put people in space, right? What do you think? What did I hear? Musk said that he starts taking private citizens. SpaceX is claiming they're going to start putting private citizens in space by end of 2021, early 2022.
I think everyone's saying that. Everyone's saying that they're going to be taking up.
But this is just like low Earth orbit. This isn't like you're going to the moon and stuff yet.
There's no price tags yet. What I liked what Blue Origin's doing is that they have the biggest. So they said they can have 6 people, up to 6 passengers in their capsule, in their crew capsule, but they have the largest windows of any commercialized spacecraft, and I thought that's going to be really rad. Because I mean, your Instagram is going to look pretty cool if you go up there. It's going to be a $25 million picture, but totally worth it.
I think that's Virgin Galactic. That's Virgin. So Virgin's doing that. They are actually.
I thought it was New Shepard. I thought that was the New Shepard rocket.
It could be. I just know that we can look that up, because I know Virgin Galactic is debuting the interior of their their jet because they're the ones that have the 6 seats. I believe they're charging like $250,000.
That's it?
Starting for those seats. Yeah.
Oh man, I thought it'd be like millions of dollars. I'll sell my house and go tomorrow. Let's do this.
Dude, sell your house, get up there. I think the flight lasts maybe a couple hours, so you'll be living in a cardboard box by the time you get back. But
totally worth
it. You can come down and hang out in the basement with me, right? So
totally worth it.
Dude, I'm glad you brought that up because Virgin Galactic is debuting. Kind of a cool thing. Just follow it.
That
check
is
out
really
Virgin
cool.
Galactic.
I didn't know that was going to happen. I mean, they're one of my favorite. I mean, they've sold to Alaskan Airlines, but they used to be one of my favorite airlines to travel. Like they just said, their interior looked so cool. You had your own personal little monitor. You had like the buckets, leather.
You could play video
seats.
games.
Yeah. So I bet you it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I think Branson's onto something there. They're the more. I don't know what I would say. The more they seem to be more about the monetization in the beginning, whereas Musk is obviously still relying sort of on like government contracts. He's not. I don't know if they're necessarily selling tickets. You could correct me on that. I don't know what ticket prices. I think I remember Virgin Galactic being like $250K.
Wow.
And you could get up there. There's another company actually. While I was saying this, was what was this company name? They're called Space Perspective. Okay, and what they came up with, which I thought would be a kind of a cool idea, is they're creating like a giant balloon. All right, because you're talking about like 6 people, right, in like a jet that flies. That would be cool. But what they're proposing is like a giant like Lando Calrissian. Like balloon type
city in the clouds.
Yeah, and it just basically it goes up and it just goes up into space. There you go. Thanks, Tomas. And you can like hang out and like you can have like your wedding there and stuff. They're gonna put like a bar in the middle and have bathrooms, and it's like a 6 to 8 hour ride that just kind of floats up there.
It'll probably be more affordable. Do you get to experience zero gravity and all that?
I don't know if it's 0G. Because if you're having like, they're saying that they're going to have like banquets and
that'd be fun. I mean, just like
things like that.
Toss your piece of steak across the room and try and catch it in your mouth. Like that'd be a lot of fun.
Instead of walking down the aisle, you sort of like glide down the aisle. That would be cool, right?
I dig it.
So yeah, you kind of go up and then it just kind of comes back down to earth, and it's a lot. I think the whole idea is that it would be a lot more affordable, right? Because it's not like you don't have to be a trained astronaut going in there. So anyway, there's a lot of cool stuff going. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there. So right now we're sitting like low Earth orbit is where they're trying to get people, in and out of. But the exciting stuff, I think, is Mars. And so what is the timeline for us to get to Mars?
I mean, I know they've been training already for a while now. Elon's expecting to send a launch off within the next 5 years. It only takes 8 months to get there. I thought you'd think it would be longer, but they said it'd take about 8 months to get there. But it's going to happen in our generation. I don't know if we'll be colonizing Mars in our generation, but we're definitely going to put a man on another planet.
As of right now, I believe. Do you remember? This was like a couple years ago. They were like, there was like a article going around where NASA was like taking applications to be like a Mars astronaut, because essentially what it is
it's
right
a
now,
one-way trip, man.
It's a one-way trip, baby. Yeah. That's it. You're gonna go, and you might not ever come back.
Would you do it? Like if you had the opportunity, would you?
I don't know. It'd be really cool. It would be a really amazing experience, and you'd go down in history and all that stuff. But honestly, being married and having kids and stuff now, I don't think I could do that. You know what I mean?
If you could bring him with you, would you bring him with you, or do you think that's too dangerous?
I don't know. It's so beyond my mind. I just wonder, like, what kind of life would they have?
I don't know. I mean,
you're just stuck. You can only live in the habitat. It's not like you can go outside and stretch your legs and get a breath of fresh air.
I mean, they're going to be planning. Who knows how long it'll take for them to.
You're talking about terraforming, bro. Okay.
Planet. But
all right, this is another. Don't get me in another bet here where we go like over or under. How long does it take to terraform
lose,
Mars?
My friend, you will lose.
I'll be nude in my spacesuit.
I couldn't go with. I couldn't take my daughter up there with me, because I mean, I like movies too much, and alien scares the crap out of me, and that's exactly what happened. Was they colonized another planet and then got taken over by this vicious alien species. So
I know that I'm like plugging the hell out of Netflix here, but there's another kind of a cool series on Netflix called Mars, which is like a, what do you call this? You're the film guy, where it's like narrative and documentary. So it's like
a mockumentary. No, it's not
it's
a
not
mockumentary.
mocking.
It's like
no, it's like a docu series where it's like
series.
they'll splice together clips of like Elon Musk and like real time what we're building and doing stuff right now. But there's like a futuristic narrative
That's
of
cool.
like with actors and stuff of the people that make this trip and like the psychological warfare that it plays on them of being stuck there and like having to do all this stuff. It was really intriguing to watch that and watch someone sort of envision that, and that's why I'm saying it's slightly panic inducing and very anxiety watching these people like they're like, I gotta get out of here, and the guy opens the door and blows the whole thing up because he just wants to breathe air, not recycled, habitat air, and that's why I'm saying recycled fart air,
straight fart box. I mean, going to space would be a lot of fun. And
how did you just
I want to, but what's like pooping like up there? Like how does like evacuating yourself? That can't be fun. Like
you're reducing the next
gravity.
You're reducing the next major leap in humankind to a fart joke. You, sir, are a gentleman and a scholar.
It's the things you got to think about before you make these kind of decisions. And do you want to poop in a bag for the next
where do you
40
shit?
Years?
All right. Okay. So space is hard. Space is tough. Here's the other thing. So we've got all these billionaires and stuff. Space is so crazy expensive. Hold on. Let me just read some stats here real quick because I didn't want to start with this and bore the hell out of everybody with stats immediately.
Snoozing.
Right. Here we go. So here's just some quick stats I'm going to rip off at you, okay? So 563 astronauts have gone off planet. That's 501 men, 62 women. All right. All these people came from 40 different countries. There's been 30 deaths in space flight or training. So that's a 5% mortality rate. All right.
Yeah, wow. That's high.
It is. I didn't get a chance. Maybe Tomas can Google this before the show is over. What's the rate of like mortality for like car accidents? That's what I was wondering. Is it safer to go to space than it is to drive a car?
I doubt that. Dude, 5%.
Well, they say like flying an airplane is like safer than. Yeah. You're less likely to die in a plane crash.
5% sounds so high though.
I don't know. Google, Tomas, give us a Google on that. So anyway, 15 international space agencies with independent launch capability, meaning they don't need other countries to get to space, okay? So that's a lot, dude.
Yeah.
Like when you're talking only 5 countries made the ISS, right? Here's some dollar bills for you, dollar bills, y'all. The global price tag per year for space travel is $62 billion a year. NASA, by itself, its yearly price tag is $21.5 billion, okay? So that's a ton of money. You can see why they're more than happy to have these like 4 or 5, billionaire guys getting involved in this. And even they say, like, space travel is not, it's not doable without government contracts. So it has to be this like,
or if you're Jeff Bezos,
collaboration.
Like $1 to $2 billion into his company every year.
Right.
Got to be nice.
So it's pretty crazy, right? So I just wanted to touch on that. Just how many people have been to space? How expensive is it? Right? And there's just a bunch of cool stuff that you can pull from that documentary. But it starts off with the stats, and I just thought that was really cool because I saw another thing on Instagram that the United Arab Emirates launched a Mars space probe.
Yeah, I saw that.
I saw you tagging that. You tagged me in some. And the reason why that caught my eye is because I don't know if I'm just like naive, typical Westerner, but there's typically like the big 6, okay? So there's like USA, Russia, China, Japan, the European Space Agency, and then I don't know, like I think it's Canada. those are like the top 6, and that's basically what that means is that those 6 countries can get people, they can get satellites, they can probably weaponize. Like, they don't need other stuff to get to space. When I heard that the United Arab Emirates, which, like, I kind of know where it's at on a map, like, I couldn't, if you put a gun to my head, I would not be able to find it. But when countries like that are starting to probe Mars and do all these types of things, again, I don't know if it's a competition, but there's part of me that still wants the good old US of A to, like, be the first person or first country there to sort of, I don't know, regulate it a little bit, right? Like, you got all these different countries grabbing, we don't know what's out there. What if there's, like, precious metals or crazy materials or something that's incredibly lucrative or whatever? Don't we want to get there? Like,
well, I'm sure we have somewhat of an idea. We've had the rover out there for a while now. We've been sending probes out ourselves, so
right.
I mean, I think we're gonna have the first man on Mars, or woman. I think it'd be really cool if it was a woman to take their first steps on another planet.
Yeah, dude, those stats are great. We got to get some ladies up in space. Let's go. You know what I mean? It's too much testosterone out there.
But I mean, it's if we are within the next 5 years from having boots on Mars, why is it so ridiculous to think that other civilizations haven't visited us?
Well,
and I think that's why, speaking of space exploration, I think that's also why all this news has been coming out the last couple of years, because of how rapidly the technology is getting there, and because privatized space exploration, now that SpaceX has changed the game, it's gonna quickly happen. And I think that our government is starting to slowly release this kind of stuff, so it's not all at once, or it's like, okay, we know this, that, or the other, because they're going to have to answer some questions soon if we're going to be up in space looking out of a Virgin Galactic window and we see these unexplained lights come and interact with you.
Right. And the other thing is not only that, but, you've got to think about the timing of all this stuff. When President Trump was elected, one of the first things that he did, that he, one of the many things that, but he created that Space Force. And I know everyone like kind of mocked it. And, we've got the Steve Carell show on Netflix and stuff now, which is hilarious, by the way. Everyone kind of made fun of the Space Force, but we've tried to do this in the past, right? Ronald Reagan had the Star Wars, program. Like, we've been aware that we need some sort of, like, global defense or offensive mechanism, but also, like, to your point, when you start launching human beings into space to go hit other planets, whether or not there's other species or anything else flying out there, regardless of that, humans are pretty destructive creatures as well, right? So whatever's happening, it needs to be regulated. Just the way, like, the highway systems, like, we pay to have police, we pay to have a military to make sure that, like, no one just comes over and takes our stuff, right? So that's what I'm saying is, like, we got to get out there and we got to figure this stuff out. And, like, I know that space is supposed to be, like, the great equalizer, like, no more borders and boundaries. It's all this, like, let's all get together, sing Kumbaya, and exist in space together. That's just not in human nature, okay? So I don't care what country you're from. It's just like, if I get there first and I've got some precious mineral, that's mine, and I'm not going to want you to have it because I'm going to want to charge you a premium. That's capitalism. That's just, like, in our nature. And when that happens, whether it's aliens or not, we're going to want to have some sort of, like, defense or offensive mechanism just sort of to, like, keep everyone playing by the rules. You know what I mean?
Gotcha, yeah.
And so I think, I think it's interesting, and I hope that we get there. And I know that I think I agree with you that I think this is part of the process of why we're seeing the slow disclosure rollout, is because we can't just come out and be like, yeah, we've got anti-gravity weapons or things that can shoot lasers in space. You can't set up, like, a space police force and not explain where the hell that technology came from. So you're going to have to, like, fess up to it sooner or later. And
at
I
least
think
give
that's
them
why
a
we're seeing
lightsaber or something.
Roll.
They need a budget to make a lightsaber.
For real. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's my 2 cents. Is I'm super excited about it. I know that you like the disclosure stuff. I like the more just like, I think space is cool, and I like that space is becoming more marketable, right? Like I told you the story of when I was taking an Uber the other day, and the Uber driver was wearing like a NASA hat, and I asked her if she was into it. Yeah, there you go. And she was just like, no, I picked it up at H&M. It's trending right now. And me being, the dad I am, right? I have no idea what's trendy or like whatever. So I just thought that was cool. Like that, someone younger than me was into it. Whether she's into like the actual facts of everything, it doesn't matter. Just wearing like the NASA hat and stuff like you are, it just makes it cool again. And I think it's exciting time to be in 2020, and that we don't have to just focus on the negative stuff of the pandemic. And everyone's like, I can't wait till this year is over. I think there's a lot of good that's coming out of this stuff as well.
Oh,
I mean,
100%.
What about?
Yeah,
has 2020 been an okay year for you?
I wouldn't go that far. It's been a trying year for me, especially with my industry as an independent filmmaker. It took a really big hit, and I've been stuck indoors quite a bit, which helped us spark the idea for this show, this podcast, something that we could do remotely, and just making it through. Everyone, we're all alone, being isolated and quarantined, but we're all in this together. And I think the space, what Elon Musk is doing in 2020 has been the highlight of my year. Anyway,
dude, he's like Superman. Like, but how is he not like? He is like incredibly intelligent. He's like, rich and kind of has his, what's the word? Like he's eccentric, right? He's an eccentric billionaire. But when a guy can build a rocket company to get you to Mars, and he can smoke a doobie on like
he's making
national
space cool
television,
again.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's pretty cool. I thought that was kind of cool. Like you're not, I can't imagine anybody in the past, the baby boomer generation, really getting behind a guy like that. I'd be like, get this hippie out of here. But dude, that's what happens when you open up your mind. That's what NASA did in 2011 when they shut down the space shuttle and they stopped funding it. And they put out, bids and stuff, and you had Boeing and SpaceX right there trying to get it. Sometimes you just need like a stoner with some freaking astronomical ideas to come out. I don't know if he's a stoner or not. I don't know if he's
got too much going on to be a stoner, but
like, dude,
Joe Rogan wants
he
to
lives in
smoke a
California.
Doob,
It's recreational in California, completely legal. Let Elon smoke, right? Let Elon smoke. That's all I'm saying. But the point I'm trying to make is space doesn't have to be this stuffy astrophysics. Like before there was just such a high bar for entry that I think it's making it more maintainable. And like you said in the top of the show, when you were a kid, it was like cops, firefighters, and astronauts, baby.
Or professional athlete.
Or professional athlete.
I wanted to be a baseball player for a while, but astronaut was on the top of that list.
Right. So do you have anything else over there on your notes? I mean, that's kind of like what I wanted to cover and get out of the way.
Yeah, I think we covered up anything. I mean, yeah, I think that's a good time to wrap up the show. Tomas, do you want to add anything? We didn't get to hear much from you tonight. If you're still there. Are you awake? Did we bore you?
I'm alive. You sent me down a rabbit hole. I was looking up that statistic for you, and then I started trying to pull up a video of Elon smoking weed because I thought that'd be fun. But
yeah. What is this? What was the stats on that? By the way, did you find it?
It says, according to the National Safety Council, the chances of dying from a motor vehicle crash is 1 in 103. Okay. So
wow,
really?
So that's like
but those crashes though. That's 1 in 103 crashes. It's not.
Yeah, so that's like 1%. That's like
the less than 1% mortality rate for or crash, not for every flight.
Crash. So space is more dangerous. You're right.
Yeah,
5% is pretty freaking high. Yeah. So,
but that number will change as they start churning out people traveling up there.
Yeah, I think it's already changed. I imagine the majority of those 30 people that died had to have been in the initial like training and like like I said, the Space Shuttle Challenger. Like one of the first before we even got a rocket off the ground. Unfortunately, I think there was like an electrical fire in the space capsule and it killed the guys in there. So like, yeah, it was rough, man. So. We've definitely cleaned that up, and it's a lot. That's why it's so cool to see like SpaceX putting guys in like futuristic, skinny jean tuxedo type spacesuits, and they got elbow room and like bathrooms, and it looks safer, and that's going to be ultimately what gets people on board.
Well, I'm excited. Let's sell our houses and go. What do you guys say?
I'm down. I'm already purchased my ticket. Let's go now. Right?
I'm excited.
So, well, all right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in again. That's going to do it for us today. Tune in next week. All right. But don't forget, check out all the stuff and more that we just referenced. We'll have it all linked on the website. Right. Dustin's going to be posting pictures of Tulip Pumpernickel
Tulip Pumpernickel, cutest dog
ever.
Is
that Instagram you're going to do that or what?
Sure,
Instagram,
I'll put it on Instagram.
Facebook?
Yeah, it's at I Believe in Humans podcast, and that's also an IBelieveInHumansPodcast.com is our website.
Beautiful. So check out the website. Check us out on Instagram and Facebook. Everybody loves to see a puppy. And also, guys, just continue to stream us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Give us a like. Check out the video clips on YouTube, right? So if you want to see what we're talking about and see Dustin, your beautiful face, mine and Tomas's and all the stuff we're referencing, check us out on YouTube. Guys, stay safe, right? Keep looking up, and let's all tune in again and watch Bob Behnken and these guys come home. I think that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Right?
Let's tune in.
So, all right, guys, that's all we got for you. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.
There he is.